Karibu and welcome back to Melanated Truth. My name is John. We are continuing our series through Genesis. For today's Torah talk, we are in Genesis chapter 2. Before we jump into Genesis chapter 2, you might remember last time we did Genesis chapter 1. And one of the big takeaways from Genesis chapter 1 is that Genesis is the 30,000 foot view. Genesis 1 is the 30,000 foot view of the Most High creating the world. And in the 30,000 foot view, the crown jewel of creation is humanity. God makes man, and man is not just good, he's very good. And there's this poem. There's this poem at the end of Genesis 1 where God is saying that he's making man in his likeness and his image, and the image of God. He created them, male and female. He created them, and it's this beautiful thing. So then in Genesis chapter 2, what happens is essentially, if you think about it like a movie director, the camera zooms in, not at the 30,000 foot view, but now on the ground. What is it? What would it look like? What would it have been like to be there as the world was being created on a more ground level? So let's look at Genesis chapter 2. The big takeaway from Genesis chapter 1 is that man has a dignified place in the world, specifically as an image bearer. Man is the only, male and female, man is the only portion of God's creation that is blessed, that is called to fill, and is called to rule. All three of those things together. All the other portions of creation are either blessed or called to rule or called to fill, but only humanity has all those three things put together. So they're given this this place of distinction to be God's representatives on the earth, to fill the earth and to subdue it. Okay. So now we enter to Genesis chapter 2, and Genesis chapter 2 has an agenda, and it wants to answer mainly three questions. The three questions Genesis chapter 2 is answering is, what is man? Where is man? And why is man? What is man? Where is man? Why is man? So as the camera zooms in, it's zooming in on basically this: what is humanity here for? What are we created to do? Where are we? Why are we? And it gives a reflection of who the Most High is and how we fit into this whole created order of things. So let's look down at it. Starting in verse 1, and heaven and earth and all their array were finished. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, or made it holy. He set it apart, because on it he rested from all of his work of creating that there was to do. Okay, so he creates the world and then he stops. And because he stops and rests on the seventh day, he blesses that day and he sets it apart. So now three things, if you're keeping up, three things have been blessed thus far in the book of Genesis. The birds of the heavens have been blessed and called to fill the air and whatnot. Humanity has been given this special blessing called image bearers. And then now this seventh day has been blessed and set apart because God rests from all of his work. So we need to follow and trace the blessings and the curses through the Torah, because it's telling us a pivotal part of the story. Okay, so we come down to verse 4. These are the generations of heaven and earth when they were created. So let's stop there just for a second. This word here is toledat, and it's just a way that Genesis is going to continue to break up these patterns. And almost every time as Genesis is turning the angle or focusing the camera on, for the rest of the Genesis, is going to be certain family members and certain genealogies. It zooms in with this word toledat. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth. These are the generations of Abraham. These are the generations of Shem. These are the generations, so on and so forth. But here, and what happens is a chronological kind of expression, genealogical expression of what happens. So what we should expect here is some kind of, basically in Genesis chapter 1, we see all the puzzle pieces and all of the layers of creation with which God creates. And then when we get in Genesis chapter 2, it's going to be a little bit more of an organized order of how certain things went down, specifically the creation of man, as we discover what his purpose is. Okay, so chapter 4. In the day that Yahuwah Elohim made heaven and earth before any plant of the field was on earth and before any plant of the field had sprung up, because Yahuwah had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was no human being to cultivate the ground. But a stream would rise from the earth and water the whole face of the ground. So let's just imagine what that would have been like. There was no plant, there was no shrub in the field. So what you've got is eretz, you've got the ground or the earth that is sprung up out of the water, according to Genesis 1. And you don't have any plants, you don't have any vegetation because the conditions haven't been met for that to happen yet. And instead of rain coming down, what you have is some kind of spring from the ground watering the surface of the earth, essentially prepping it for it to be fruitful for vegetation. So when you get dirt and you get water, what do you have? You've got this muddy land, right? Verse 7. And when Yahuwah Elohim formed the man of dust from the ground, he blew into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living creature. So what's happening here in Genesis chapter 2? Yahuwah essentially scoops up some mud, he forms it in some kind of way, then he comes face to face with the mud. This is the word picture that we're getting, and he breathes into these mud creatures, the breath of life. Now, it's very interesting when we compare that to Genesis chapter 1, because remember, in Genesis chapter 1, the very first thing that the Most High does, he comes face to face with the waters. He begins to merahefet, he hovers over the waters, or he vocalizes, and he speaks, and then light happens, right? Now he comes face to face, he forms the mud in the ground, he comes face to face with the mud, he breathes into this mud creature breath, and it lives. It's a really interesting turn, because in Genesis chapter 1, the author intends for us to see the distinguished place that we have amongst all the created order. We're not dogs, we're not animals, we're not trees, we're not any of those things. We are human beings, and we've been given this status as image bearers. We've been given a very specific job to be image bearers, to fill the earth, to subdue it, to be fruitful and multiply, etc. In Genesis 2, first thing that we see is that we're still dirt creatures. So as glorious as the position that we've been given is, we must remain humble. We're creatures made out of dust, out of mud. Verse 8, and Yahuwah planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And Yahuwah Elohim caused to grow from the ground every tree. There we go, the correlated relationship between trees and humanity. As soon as God makes, now when we're talking about this thing more chronologically, as soon as God makes man from the dirt, now he's starting to grow the trees up out of the mud as well. He made every tree from the ground that was pleasing to the sight and good for food. And the tree of life was in the midst, or in the middle of the garden, along with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now a river flowed from Eden that watered the garden. So now, again, think about, try to imagine what's being said here. What happens is the Most High splits the waters, and then from the waters below causes the ground to resurface, and now there's this muddy place that's full of potential and ready to be sown and planted and cultivated and whatnot. And he creates this place called Eden in the midst of it. Then within Eden, he creates this place he calls the Garden of Eden, in the east of Eden. So now this is a highly cultivated, well taken care of place. He forms the model of what he wants the rest of the world to look like. And he takes man from Eden, places them in the Garden of Eden to cultivate and to keep it. Verse 10. So and there are all these trees in the garden, but they're specifically in the middle of the garden are these two trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and bad, or good and evil. Verse 10. Now a river flowed from Eden that watered the garden, and from there it diverged and became 4 branches. The name of the first is the Paishan. It went all through the land of Havilah, where there is gold. The gold of that land is good. Bdellium and onyx stones are there. And the name of the second is Gihon. It went all around the land of Cush. The name of the third is the Tigris, which flows east of Assyria, and the name of the fourth river is the Euphrates. So, what is man? Man is fundamentally a mud creature. That's what Genesis 2 is telling us bluntly. When we're talking about the substance of what man is. And later on, the Bible is going to play on that. From dust you came, and dust you will return. We are these creatures made by mud, but breathed into by the Most High Himself and given life. Now, what's really interesting about this description is here in verse 11, as it's describing these rivers that watered the garden, we hear about the land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. And there's also bdellium and onyx stones. So we've got this place that there's not only precious metals like gold, but also these other substances. There's some argument as to what bdellium exactly is, but there's other substances that are good, bdellium and onyx stones, etc. So what we see is that the Most High made a choice. When He was making His image bearers, He could have taken gold, but He doesn't. Instead, what He takes is dirt creatures. We see the intention of the Most High here. Now, as we progress and we learn about all the false gods that we come encounter with this in the scripture, often they have these idols that are erected to them, and these idols are made of whatever precious substance they can find: gold, silver, bronze, whatever. But when the Most High, but none of those statues can speak. The Psalms play on that. You form this statue and it looks great, but it's got ears and it can't hear. It's got a mouth, but it can't speak, etc. It's dead. It's not alive. It's not alive. The reverse is true of the Most High. When He's making His image bearers, He's using this common substance, mud, nothing inherently special about it, but He breathes into it life, and it can live and move. It's a living creature. It can walk around. Those are His image bearers, as compared to the idols. So that's what man is, according to Genesis 2. It's a mud creature, and it's a specific choice for the Most High to have made us in the way that He has. He didn't use the gold of the land that was good. Instead, He chose to use the mud. We need to know that. Genesis wants us to know that. So that's what man is, according to Genesis 2. Where is man? We see that this garden, it gives us this little map from verses 10 through 14. But let's zoom into it for a second. There's this first river, Paishan. It went all around the land of Havilah, where there is gold. Then the second is Gihon. It went all around the land of Cush. And the name of the third is the Tigris. It flows east of Assyria. And the fourth river is the Euphrates. Now, that's really interesting. You've got these mud creatures, and now you've got this map. And on this map, you've got Havilah, the land of Havilah, the land of Cush, something that flows to east of Assyria. When you fast forward to Genesis chapter 10, you get the table of nations. In the table of nations, the son of Ham, one of the sons of Ham, is Cush. Cush meaning black. You got one of the sons of Cush, and this is this is pretty unarguable that Cush is an African. And in the land, but Cush has several sons. One of Cush's sons, the second son of Cush, is Havilah. So now we've got two Cushitic, Hamitic territories that we're in. And then this third river, the Tigris, it flows east of Assyria. Assyria is interesting because right there in Genesis 10 as well, you've got a character named Nimrod, who's one of Cush's grandsons. And he not only plants Babylon or Babel, but he also plants Nineveh and Assyria. So now we've got three Cushitic territories. And then the fourth river is the Euphrates. Now, this is interesting because the Euphrates that we see on the map today is not the Euphrates. If you look back at older maps, the oldest maps that we can find put the Euphrates in Africa as well. I'll let you look into that yourselves. But yeah, so what we have, and let's just say that this Euphrates is the Euphrates that we currently have right now. It's undeniable that three of these four places are in Hamite, Cushite territories. So here's what Genesis 2 just said. Genesis 2 just said that when Adam was placed in the garden, he was formed out of mud. What does mud look like? And he was formed out of mud, and he was placed in a garden, and that garden was in the territory of Cush. What did the first man look like? Where you must use your own creative imagination and then ask yourself, the images that naturally come up of Adam and Eve, why do those images come up and where did they come from? Part of the goal of this Bible study is to help us decolonize our minds, one chapter of the scriptures at a time. But they're not just in this African land called Cush. It's not just the where they are is not just this map called Cush, but they're specifically put in a garden. And this is the more theological portion of what the Most High is doing here. He could have put Adam anywhere. And where does he put him? He puts him in the middle of a garden. So what is true about the Most High? The Most High cares about these humans. He's breathed his own breath of life in them. He's called them his image bearers. He puts them in this land that is good. It's got all of these fruit trees. It's got all of this vegetation. It's also got all these precious substances, gold, bdellium, onyx, etc. And what does he call them to do? Verse 15, and Yahuwah Elohim took the man and set him in the garden to cultivate it and keep it. So just to conclude the where portion of Genesis 2, he places man in this place to express to them what he thinks of them and what he's doing for them. Namely, he's placing them in a good place. It reminds me of Psalm 84, verse 11. The Lord is a sun and shield. He gives grace and glory, and no good thing does he withhold from those who walk uprightly. He is being exorbitantly generous to this dirt creature. And we're going to see that there's someone who has a little bit of a beef with that eventually. But this is setting up. Genesis 1, Genesis 2 is setting up what happens in Genesis 3. So we need to go slowly enough through it. So question 1, what is man? Man is fundamentally a mud creature, not made out of gold. So God is different than the idols of the other peoples, who when they call their prophets to cast idols for their false god, they make them out of gold and silver, bronze, whatever. And so that's what man is. Where is man? Man is in the land of Cush, but specifically in a tailor-made garden that God has in the land of Cush. And they are called to cultivate and keep that land. So then why is man? The last question. Why is man, according to Genesis chapter 2, verse 15? Took the man, put him in the garden to cultivate it and keep it. Now, this word keep it is the same word that we're going to get when the Bible starts talking about keeping the law and all these kinds of things. These two words work together. To cultivate it is to further it, right? To keep making more and more territory look like the garden. And then keep it is the same word for guard. In other words, make sure that no weeds encroach on this garden land. Maintain it, cut the grass, prune the trees, those kinds of activities. So man is put in the garden to maintain what God has already done and to further it, to cultivate more of the land to look like Eden, and to make sure Eden continues to stay looking like Eden, to guard Eden from any encroaching, from it corroding from what the Most High has made it. So that's the first thing. Verse 16, and Yahuwah Elohim commanded the man, saying, from every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for on the day that you eat it, from it you shall surely die. But notice that the tree of life was not prohibited. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil is the only thing that's prohibited. God has given them every tree from the garden, everything that they might need. And you find out a part of why man was created was not just to cultivate and keep, but also to enjoy. He's given them everything that they need to eat. He's not placed them in some wild wilderness. Instead, he's placed them in a garden. and that he wants them to care for the garden, to enjoy the garden, and to cultivate and keep the garden. There's only one prohibition. The prohibition is don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, at very least, what that means is it's establishing this pecking order. Yes, you have dominion over the earth, and the one that you submit to, the only one you submit to, is the Most High. So this first command is establishing this pecking order between the Most High and his image bearers, his creatures. Verse 18, then Yahuwah said, it is not good for that man, for the man is alone. I will make for him a helper suitable or as a counterpart. And out of the ground, Yahuwah Elohim formed every beast from the field and every bird from the sky, and he brought each to the man to see what he would call it. So let's stop. So now you've got man in partnership with Elohim, cultivating and keeping the garden. And now the very thing that Yahuwah Elohim is doing in chapter 1, when he remember Genesis chapter 1, God said, let there be light, and there was light. That's the creative voice of God, right? He speaks and it happens. God doesn't call man to do that. But then right after that, it says he sees that the light is good and he calls the light day. This is the same verb that's being used here. So now what do we see? God is allowing man to partner with him in his creative work. Not in the from your mouth verbally creating the thing, but in the categorizing and organizing the thing. Whatever the man calls the animal or the bird, that's its name, because he's given authority over it. And we'll see that over and over in the scriptures. The one who has the authority to name someone or something, he has authority over that place, whether it's the naming of a land or the naming of people. We'll see that more and more. There's one thing that's not good in the garden in Genesis chapter 2, and that's that the man is alone. So what does the Most High do? Verse 21, and Yahuwah Elohim caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man. While he slept, he took one of his ribs. He closed it up, the flesh where it had been. And Yahuwah Elohim fashioned the rib which he had taken from the man into a woman, or the word here is Isha, and brought her to the man. And the man said, she is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken from man. This little poem coincides with the poem of Genesis chapter 1, where Elohim says, let's make man in our likeness and our image. And then God creates them in male and female. He created them in his image. And it's this poem of excitement and enjoyment over his creation. And now Elohim makes the woman, and you see the same poem where man sees his counterpart. It's not a deer, it's not a lion, it's a woman. It's a woman, and it's the woman is suitable for him, and he celebrates over her, flesh of his flesh, bone of his bones, and he calls her woman. He calls her Isha. Notice her name is not Eve. In Genesis chapter 2, the woman's name is not Eve. The woman's name is Isha. We'll get to that in Genesis chapter 3. Verse 24, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and shall cling to his Isha, his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And the man and his wife, both of them were naked and they were not ashamed. This is shalom. Everything is working well. God is good. Everything's what the birds are doing what they're supposed to do. The sea animals are doing what they're supposed to do. Man and woman are finally together, and they have work. They have their job to cultivate and keep the garden. They have a relationship with God, and that is in sync. They are submitted to God, and God provides for them. They have partnership with one another. They have the man finally has a counterpart for himself in the garden, and this is what man is made for. Man is created, one, for a relationship with the Most High. You were created for that. Man was made to partner with the Most High in what he's doing, which is why when Yahusha or Jesus comes on the scene and he says, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, what he's saying is there needs to be a reuniting in that partnership between God and man. Something is broken there. And part of what Jesus comes to do is to restore the relationship between God and man and the partnership between God and man. So you were created for a relationship with God. That's why you are. You were created to partner with God. That's why you are. And then you were created to partner with one another. You're created to have relationships with other people. This is why we were created. And this is what the Bible describes as shalom. If we think about Genesis 1 and 2 as a piece of music, essentially what the Most High does, or like I like to describe the Bible like jazz music, what the Most High has done in Genesis 1 and 2 is he's played all of the notes. He's shown us how the music goes really well together. He's caused us to enjoy the music that he has created. He's showing us just how beautiful the music could be. He's causing us to long to hear this song again, for the beat to just be exactly what we see and hear here. He's expressed all of our wants and needs and desires in just these couple of chapters. This is what the perfect life looks like. In relationship with God, partnered with him and doing what he calls us to do. Not only guarding and protecting what he says is precious, but also cultivating, furthering, developing the creation that he's already put around us, and in partnership with people. In obviously in the marriage relationship, but in other ways as well. You see seeds of all these things: a vertical relationship with God and a horizontal relationship with man, and that's why man is. So we're going to end here. Obviously, what happens next is a tragedy. If you've ever read the Bible, or if you know, and most likely if you've made it to this part of the video, you know what happens next. But in order to understand the tragedy of Genesis chapter 3, we've got to understand the patterns and the beauty of Genesis chapter 1 and 2. God, in Genesis chapter 1, makes man in his image and gives him the highest place among all the creatures. The closest thing to God there is humanity, though not God. Genesis chapter 2, we get a dose of reality that man is created in the image of God, yes, but he's made out of dirt. He's not gold. He's not bdellium. He's not onyx. He's made out of dirt, and he is in submission to God, and he has these needs. And one of the needs is he needs fellowship with God, and he needs fellowship with other humans. This is the full story of pre-fall humanity. Now, it's interesting to note that Genesis 1 and 2 starts in a garden, and the book of Revelation ends in a garden. It starts with a tree, and it ends with a tree. In other words, we've fallen very far from this ideal, but he's promised we'll make it back there. For all those who trust on Yahushua's name, we're going to be a part of restoring humanity unto this Edenic ideal. So my name is John. This is Melanated Truth. This is the Torah Talk number 2, and we hope that you would join us again. We say Karibu, which just means in Swahili, it just means welcome. We welcome you to study your Bible with us and to continue to do this as we walk through the scriptures. So peace and blessings. I want to leave you with Romans chapter 15, verse 13, where Paul says, "May the God of hope fill you with joy and peace in believing, so that you may abound in hope by the power of the Holy Spirit." Shalom and take care.